I would not be surprised is if within the next couple years, the SEC is the first billion-dollar conference in college football, in college sports. What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master Football, back at it again. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for being here. Never been here before. This is Jake with Master Football, pro football, college football, video game football, anything related to American football we discuss in the show right now. Please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment, please subscribe, please do all that stuff. I'd really appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, guys, so we are heading into the weekend. The Super Bowl is on Sunday. Big game here. The Hall of Fame class of 2022 just got announced. Tony Baselli, Jaguars, finally got a guy in there, so good for them. The NFL awards were tonight. Aaron Rodgers just won his 4th MVP and the 2nd one in a row, so he's doing well. But I wanted to check into the college football world, and the reason why is because I think there's so many more compelling stories right now. Right now, obviously the Hall of Fame is pretty important. The NFL honors is just their excuse for their Grammys or Emmys, whatever the hell that is. The Super Bowl's coming up, and that's going to suffocate the room. But I wanted to talk about a report that came out because I want to talk about kind of a conference stock report right now, okay? I want to check in with all of the Power 5 conferences, see how they're doing, see whose stock is up, see whose stock is down, see why, and get into those things. So let's get into that right now. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was this. I saw this report the other day. So it says right here, SEC to distribute nearly $55 million to each member after revenue rolls to $777 million. It's $0.8 million in 2020 and 2021. So that's the 2020 to 2021 season. So that is basically all up until, I want to say, July 31st of 2021. So not this last season. So up until that point. So this was a COVID year that they're calculating in here. The revenue rose. Now, you have to remember a big aspect behind that. So this report right here says that revenue rose to $770 million. This next report says that it rose to $833 million. I'm not 100% sure which one's right or not. All I know is that the reports from the previous year have now come out on how much money the schools have made, and the SEC is raking it in. I do think a big factor behind that was the 2020-2021 season was a COVID year, so there was lots of testing, there's lots of this, there's lots of that, especially with the football. The Big Ten and many of the other conferences did not start until October, maybe even later. And so that's where they were at, where the SEC played their full schedule. That came down to like a Republican, Democrat, an open state, a closed state. It was kind of where it kind of factored in. So I think these numbers could be slightly inflated due to that, but that's where it comes through. Let's continue on. While most sports industry revenues substantially fell in 2020 and early 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the SEC increased its annual revenue by $105 million during a year ending August 31st, 2021. August 31st, 2021, not July 31st, 2021. The conference's new federal tax records show. The document provided by the conference on Thursday in response to a request from USA Today Sports shows the SEC with a total revenue of just over $833 million. The resulting distributions to its 14-member schools averaged about $54.6 million per school, an increase of just over $9 million per school compared to the distributions of the conference reported for its 2020 fiscal year. In addition, the SEC provided each of the schools with a $23.3 million advance on the future conference distributions in fiscal 2021, as the school's athletic department struggled through some game cancellations and attendance restrictions that affected numerous income streams. The advance money came from a loan to the SEC that, according to the new document, was for $350 million from Truist. SEC spokesman Herb Vincent said in an email that Regions is also involved in the loan. So we all remember how that kind of worked out. Remember all the games that were canceled. And remember, this is across the board. So I know that roughly about 80% of the revenue comes from the football world. So any football game cancellation is going to be huge, especially for the TV money. But then continuing on, there's basketball, there's volleyball, there's football. There's lots of other sports. I said football twice. There's lots of other sports out there that can be regenerating some money. So they were still able to generate a lot, even with all those cancellations, got some revenue in from the conference, just being like, hey, here's for a rainy day and things like that. So things are going good for the SEC in that regard. How did it turn out for other conferences? So, and this is crazy here, but this is the report from the other day. So it says that Rutgers athletics rang up a $73 million deficit I repeat, Rutgers, who was formerly of the Big East, was in the conference realignment stuff, was added basically just so that they had access to New York, rang up a $73 million deficit last year. Students, taxpayers were on the hook for that deficit. So, and typically what's happening here is that the reason why you want, and again, a big aspect for people who don't know, the big aspect of why you want to join with conference realignment, the reason why you want to join these conferences is because it can put your athletic budgets from the red into the black, from the loss into the gain. Big reason why. So they still want to have the sports out there. So even if they take a couple $1 million loss on sports, it, creates camaraderie among the students. It's a good driver of recruiting for people and things like that. It's a good attention bringer to the university. They put their commercials up. They get a lot of people from there. I went to Boise State. It's not necessarily a great school, but every time I mention I went to Boise State, boom, people are talking about the football program. Oh yeah, that blue turf, man. So it's a really important thing like that. You say I go to UT, oh, a football team. You go to Florida, oh, the football team. You go to USC, oh, the football team. Even if they go 4-8 this last season, but it's a big driver. However, you would expect that if you go to the Big Ten, the highest paying conference up until this recently, but typically the highest paying conference was the Big Ten because they were the first to have the Big Ten network. They've got a lot more infrastructure in place, but they are Big Rutgers, which was invited in, is now ringing up a $73 million deficit. So big aspect behind that, and they go into this right here, especially because of New York and New Jersey, a lot of COVID testing requirements. There's some cancellations here. They had direct subsidies. They had support rose almost 50%. It says, even with that infusion of cash, athletics reported an operating budget shortfall of more than $30 million. Rutgers Athletics received $47 million in fees, state aid, and university support in fiscal 2013, but that was just before it joined the Big Ten Conference and became a member of one of the nation's 5 wealthiest conference sports leagues. A move designed to make the athletics program at least break even, if not generate a surplus. Again, that's what they designed it for, and the Big Ten was known as, especially right now, one of the highest paying leagues. It looks like the SEC is coming up on their heels. But considering here, it says the university also received its first full share of the Big Ten Conference revenue this past fiscal year since joining the conference. So typically when you join a conference, this is probably going to happen with Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and with BYU. As they join the Big 12, they're probably not going to get that full, let's just say it's $25 million payout. There's probably going to be, 10, and then 15, and then 20, and then a couple years, and they'll get that full amount. Same thing happened here with Rutgers. So it says Rutgers gave athletics a $21.5 million loan to cover some of its operating costs during the fiscal year, raising the total borrowed annually to cover operating deficits to more than $80 million since 2016. Rutgers spokesman said on Tuesday that the university will not give such loans to athletics in the future. Yeah, it's really easy for them to say that, but it's Rutgers Athletics. They are in the Big Ten. They get destroyed by Big Ten teams all the time. I do think that Greg Schiano was back there, and he's starting to hopefully turn around. When every time he's there, he actually does a pretty good job. But yeah, that is currently how Rutgers is doing. So that's where we're at in terms of the money there. And again, a big aspect behind this too, and I want to get to realignment too right here. So we talked about money, a conference checking with the money, and it looks like the SEC is doing great. The Big Ten, one of the teams is doing bad, but I suspect that everybody else is probably doing just fine. Michigan just went to the playoff. They probably doing just fine too. But also on the realignment front, a big aspect, and a lot of people are like, yo, man, think about this. Texas is going to the SEC. And again, I don't know if it's going to be the SEC West. I don't know if it's going to be the SEC, Super Western, Far West pod, how they're going to actually cut up those 16. But a big aspect behind that 16 is now they're going to get to the point to where they're going to have these pods. I suspect pods, if they do two conferences of 8, let's just say you have 9 conference games, 8 and 8, then it's going to be 7 against your side and 2 against the other side. So you will play, I mean, again, Texas A&M still, Georgia, like there's lots of teams out there that have not played as often as they could. So what I think is going to happen here is with that conference realignment, obviously the SEC is doing just fine. Okay, they just got Texas and Oklahoma who are coming in. They're going to get even more of that. I would not be surprised if within the next couple years, the SEC is the first billion-dollar conference in college football, in college sports. So going on there from there too, and then we also had thinking about that, so we had the SEC realignment. They added Texas and Oklahoma. They're doing just fine. And then we have the ACC, Big Ten, and Pac-12. They all have the alliance, which of course I think is basically just like a handshake agreement, the fact that they're not going to be poaching each other. Although I'm going to be honest though, if they see an opportunity and they like it, they're going to take it. But Continuing on with that too, then we have the Big 12. The Big 12 at the end of the year, I think the Big 12 is just happy to be alive. I do think that the fact that Oklahoma State was 1 foot short of going to the playoff, so that was huge for them. They would get a non-Texas or Oklahoma team in the playoff. That would have been massive for them. Obviously, congrats to Baylor. But the Big 12 lost 2 of its biggest members. But I think they kind of like what they've got. I think I would not be surprised if the Big 12 approaches the ACC minus Clemson or Pac-12 minus USC traditionally. I mean, USC hasn't been good in the last couple of years. But they're kind of just like a really, really competitive league where there's lots of competition across the board. So remember, they had those 10, minus 2, plus 4, UCF, Houston, BYU and Cincinnati added in, so they're alive and they're solid. They're probably still going to be the 5th conference now, but they're stable right there. I do think there's a clear delineation between them and Mountain West and the American and things like that. The last thing I wanted to check in here was recruiting. So we have these, and again, this is updated as of 2/10. So we see here the fact that Texas A&M right now has the #1 class apparently in all of history. They have got amazing 7 5-star players. That's ridiculous. But continuing here. So here's where you're going to see some commonalities here. So 1, 2, 3. So SEC West, SEC West, SEC East. Georgia off that national championship. They're going to do just fine in recruiting. Now, gets a little bit interesting here when you go down a little bit farther. So we've got Ohio State at 4. Ohio State has always recruited pretty well. Texas, okay, Big 12, but soon to be SEC, whatever division they are, more than likely SEC West of some sort. We've got Big 10 East. Big 12 to SEC, Big 10 East. Notre Dame's not a Big 10 team, but they are kind of in Big 10 territory. At Big 12 to SEC, and then Big 10 East. Rounding out from there, we've got ACC, ACC, SEC West, SEC East, SEC East, ACC, SEC East, SEC East. This is where it gets kind of interesting. So look at this at Big Pac-12 North. The #1 class was Stanford. Pac-12 North, SEC West, ACC, Big 10 East. Now, again, think about this. Big 10 East, 2 and 10. They have the number 21 class, Indiana. Arizona, 1 and 11. 1 and 11. So 2 and 10 in the Big 10 East, one of the toughest divisions in college football. And Arizona, 1 and 11 in one of the worst conferences in college football. Excuse me, not the worst conferences. One of the worst divisions. No offense to Utah. Utah did solid. They almost had Ohio State. They couldn't quite pull it off. But these 2 teams are actually really trending up. So again, SEC East, or excuse me, Big 10 East. I did not know that Indiana was in the Big 10 East. But again, number 21 class, doing really good there. Arizona, 1 and 11, and now they're turning around. Jedfish, I might do my own video about Arizona in the future, but they are looking good for the future right now. Another aspect about this, so I think that for recruiting is big because recruiting is a shot into the future. It's almost like NFL draft classes. Like you can tell 3 years down the road, that was a really good draft class, that was a really bad draft class. But it's also one of those things where you can tell there's typically a commonality. If you've got a top flight class 3 years ago, your juniors and seniors are going to be pretty good. There's also, because again, just like this, and I think it was Steve Spurrier that said to Nick Saban, the problem with Nick Saban, if he goes to the pros, he gets 1 first-round pick every year. If he goes to Alabama, he gets 10 first-round picks every year. So that's a big aspect behind that. The recruiting is solid. I think that this right here section is not as long-lasting, but it's much more instant. So you see here the fact that, hey, Pac-12 South, SEC West, and then so Arkansas, SEC West. You see the fact that USC was on fire. Lincoln Riley goes from Oklahoma to USC, takes a bunch of players with him. And again, I made this video, they might not be ready to compete with Utah in the Pac-12 South, but they're certainly going to be a problem for the next couple of years. And although they're recruiting, their direct, like freshman recruiting wasn't necessarily great, their transfer portal was off the chain. So that's where we're at right now. So the stock report, and again, SEC stays the same. They're the #1 conference. The Big Ten, despite the fact that Rutgers, which I mean, we all know that like Rutgers is Big Ten in name only. Okay, they're not really a Big Ten team. They don't really compete at that level. We'll see what Greg Schiano can do, but their stock is still up despite the fact that Rutgers' stock is down. The Pac-12 stock is up right now, I would say, and a big aspect behind me saying that the Pac-12 stock is ahead of the ACC stock was because I think in the next couple of years, we are going to find out how valuable Brent Venables was to that Clemson and that Clemson defense. I think they'll be plenty fine. They've obviously got enough momentum going forward, but that's the big question mark here, is if Clemson comes back into the pack, who is the next team that can fill that void in the ACC group? I don't really see it right now. Again, ACC, I think their stock is a little bit down, not because of anything they've done, but because I think the Pac-12 is headed in the right direction. And then the Big 12, they, again, are clear head and shoulders above all the G5 teams, but they are still the worst just because they don't have a marquee team. They're almost like the ACC minus Clemson. That's what the Big 12 is. So we'll see how that goes on. But that is your current stock report for all of your conferences in college football. All right, guys, get in the comments. Do you hate it? Love it? Honestly, I don't care. I make these videos. Comment, like it, okay? Even if you don't like the video, like the video, and then write the comment why you don't like it. But do all that stuff. And let me know what you guys think. Have a fun Super Bowl. I know I'm going to go to a basketball game tonight. I'm going to go to a basketball game before the game on Sunday. I'm going to go to my friend's house for the game. Everybody enjoy yourselves. I'll see you guys on Monday. I'm out.